in Las Vegas. They'll be wrapping up a nearly week-long tour through some of the most critical battleground states of this election. The Harris campaign has seen a jolt of voter enthusiasm in the last 3 weeks since President Biden dropped out of the race and she became the party's presumptive nominee. She's new polling showing it's not just vibes. CNN's Harry Enton here to break that polling data down for us. Harry, what do these new New York Times polls show? I've heard from a lot of people about these today, a lot of people with eyes on these.
Yeah, a lot of people. I think this was the type of polling we've been waiting for, right? We've seen that national.
Damn, Harry was in the pocket deep for fucking Shapiro. He was talking about how great Shapiro is. What happened? He was wrong. I was right.
Polling showing movement towards Kamala Harris. Now we get some swing state polling showing something very similar. All right, these are in the Great Lake battleground states. We're talking about Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. You go back to May, what'd you see? You saw that a pretty tight race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, but you see more red than blue on the screen. Of course, all three of these states were states that Joe Biden carried last time around. You saw a 3-point lead for Trump in Pennsylvania, one well within the margin of error in Wisconsin, and then a 1-point lead for Biden, Michigan. But look at where we are now. This is the type of movement the Harris campaign has been looking for. Look in Pennsylvania, a 4-point advantage. Wisconsin, a 4-point advantage. Michigan, a 4-point advantage. And in all three of these states, we see clear movement towards the Democratic nominee. I will point out we're still in no clear leader land in this particular instance, but the Harris campaign has to love this movement. 7 points in Pennsylvania, 5 points in Wisconsin, and 3 points in the great state of Michigan, all moving towards Kamala Harris. And she has the advantage in all three, although, again, no clear leader within the margin of error.
Right. Important to keep that context in mind. Now, these aren't the only swing state polls that are showing Trump slipping.
That's exactly right. You know, if we were just talking about the New York Times, Siena College, I'd say, you know what, hold on a second, hold on. You know me, Jessica. You know that I like to see confirmation of an individual poll. So there were Ipsos polls that were conducted in these same states. And I want you to look. This is an aggregate, of course, across Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. You go back to June, what'd you see? You saw Trump on average up by 2 points. Very similar to what we saw in the New York Times Siena College poll. Look at where we are now, the August margin between Harris and Trump, and look at what we see here. We see Harris up by 2 points. Again, no clear leader, but that 4-point movement, very similar to what we saw in the New York Times Siena College poll. And this is what we're seeing across the polling data. It's not just one poll. It's not just one pollster. It's across pollsters. It's across polls. And of course, in these Great Lake battleground states that are going to be so important, we're seeing this 4-point move with, instead of seeing a small Republican lead, we're seeing a small Democratic Party lead. And in this particular case, a small Kamala Harris lead over Donald Trump, the reverse of what we were just seeing just 2 months ago.
Yeah, and of course, the reason we care about these particular states so much is because of the Electoral College and how this all is decided in the fall. What does this data mean for the Electoral College more broadly and how that's playing out?
Yeah, so look, this is what we're talking about, the race to 270 electoral votes. And I want to give Kamala Harris those Great Lake battleground states where she was leading, although within the margin of error. We're talking about Wisconsin, we're talking Michigan, we're talking Pennsylvania. If we give those 3 states to Kamala Harris, even if she loses in Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, which are far from guarantees, these, of course, were 3 states that Joe Biden carried last time around, but in which the Democrats have been falling a little bit short of their 2020 numbers, at least in recent data, at least when Joe Biden's in the race. But if we give Harris Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, look at that. She doesn't even need these Sun Belt battleground states. She gets to exactly 270 electoral votes. So the fact is, when you see those polls in those Great Lake battleground states, and you see that Harris has turned the tide around from basically, you know, Donald Trump being slightly ahead to now Harris being slightly ahead, that could be the entire ballgame. Even if she loses down south, if she wins up north, that's enough. That gets her to exactly 270 electoral votes. And that's why those New York Times Siena College polls, as well as those Ipsos polling data, why it means so much.
And so here we are. We're probably, I'm ballparking it here, 80-something days away from the election at this point. How much?
Yeah, good thing that she went with like an actual solid Midwest pick instead of Josh Shapiro. Just saying.
How much can things change from now until the election?
Yeah, so we've seen a lot of movement in the last 2 to 3 months, and I just want to note that the movement that we've seen towards Harris could easily reverse itself. And the reason I say that is because how far off were the polls on August 10th compared to the final margin in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin? On average in 2016, the average from the polls at this point to the final margin, 9 points across those 3 states. How about in 2020? Look at that. The average movement from the final poll, from the polls at this point to the final margin, look at that, 5 points. So the fact is, yes, Kamala Harris may be slightly ahead right now. Again, though, a race in which there's no clear leader within the margin of error, but that could easily turn around in the final. Let's say a little bit less than 3 months to go. There's still a lot of campaign to go. We got a Democratic National Convention to go. We probably have at least one more debate to go. So still a lot can change. But at the end of the day, Jessica, if you are the Democratic Party,
a lot can change, like war with Iran that Israel brings us into. I'm just saying, we definitely should leave that out in the open. I think we definitely shouldn't nip that in the bud. That's certainly not a glaringly obvious weakness that is just like sitting there. It is a loaded gun. It's Chekhov's gun, okay? I feel like poll differences, the final margins, are the result of polls allowing for don't know responses, while elections inherently don't count those because they're not votes, or they turn into votes for one or the other. Harris is losing Latino voters and Palestine voters will cost this election. She should keep doing lip service and pro-Trump policy ads. Hillary Clinton. Yeah, I think I've said it already. Look, immigration stance needs to change for the Sun Belt, Palestine for the Rust Belt. Palestine across the board plays well for Gen Z. Like, whoa, what the fuck? Why is my camera's being extra wonky lately? Stop dooming, dude. Generic Dem destroys Trump. A generic Democrat on a matchup is very different than an actual Democrat with discernible policies, charisma, aura, statements that you can listen to. She is the generic Democrat. But now it's entirely in her hands to either win or make this a close election. Can we talk on Florida, please? We don't bring the state up enough. Obama won it. No, we will not be talking about the state of Florida. The only thing that is like, the state of Florida is still going to go deep Republican, okay? And there is a ballot initiative on there, if I'm not mistaken, that is for protecting abortion. And even then, the state of Florida is going to do what it always does. They are going to vote by like 85% margins on preserving abortion. They're going to vote by like 90%, 99% of the voters are going to vote to legalize marijuana, and then they're going to end up voting by like 8% for Donald Trump. Okay? Because they're not single issue voters? What are you talking about? I just completely described to you. First of all, most Americans are not single issue voters because they just vote on partisan lines. They vote because their daddy voted for the party. They vote because their mommy voted for the party. They vote because they voted for the party. That's it. And the 20% that actually do vote on policy issues, right, or ideological reasons, do actually vote as single issue voters. Okay? Maybe some of the people that actually vote along the party line are also still most likely single issue voters, like guns or, I don't know, being racist. So you're wrong on that. But also, why in the ever-loving fuck would you describe Florida as the reasonable voter? Like, if you're trying to make an argument about like those voters in Florida are reasonable voters, that's why, because they're not single issue voters. It is the worst fucking voter to point to as I'm in the process of describing to you how fucking unhinged Floridian median voters are. Florida voters are the most unhinged motherfuckers you've ever seen, okay? What I just told you, the margins in which they vote for a fucking insanely progressive ballot measure, like felony vote restoration, that's massively fucking progressive. They voted for that shit by double the margins of like the down ballot races for the Republican Party and Donald Trump and fucking it was Donald Trump was on the ticket, right? At that time, it wasn't like a Ron DeSantis gubernatorial. I think they were both on it, actually. That was the first time around. Yeah, Florida 64. I fucking told you. I made up the numbers in my head. Florida 64% for weed, 69% for abortion, according to polls. And it's still probably like at the minimum +8 Republican. What is it? What's the Florida polling? I haven't looked at it at all. I actually don't know. I'm totally making up the numbers, but I do know as a matter of fact that it will be significantly more popular. Those ballot measures will be significant. No, oh, poll shows Harris ahead in Miami-Dade. Oh, okay, dude. Oh, it's plus. Yep, RCP average plus 8.5, baby. Didn't even need to look at that shit. RCP is obviously right-leaning, so I won't take that dub. I'm going to go ahead and mark 2 points off of that. It's +6, okay? I know what I'm fucking talking about. Those are old ass polls. Man, August polls are not out yet. What do you want them to do? It's fucking late. It's literally late July polls. What the fuck? Calm down. Anyway.
Party, and you were looking at the polls 2-3 months ago, and you compare it where you look now, I think for no doubt they'd rather look at this picture in August than the picture they were looking at May. It's a much more rosy picture for the Democratic Party, but still a lot of campaign to go, Jessica.
Yeah, that's right. All right, Harry Enton, always great to have you break it down for us. Thanks so much for that.